Hi, my name is Chris Bray, and I'm the backgammon columnist for the Times newspaper of London. I've written 9 books on backgammon, including Backgammon for Dummies and Backgammon to Win. And I play backgammon, I teach backgammon, I commentate on backgammon, so it consumes a large part of my working life or non-working life, however you care to view that. Every year at the end of January, I go down to the Cotswolds and stay at the Bear at Rogborough to take part in Richard Biddle's delightful Cotswold Tournament. And each year when I go, on the Friday evening before play starts, I give a lecture of approximately an hour to try and get everybody infused for the weekend and hopefully provide a bit of entertainment, a bit of knowledge. This year was no exception, and I chose as my topic this year the Ultimate Backgammon Championship final from 2022. So I'm going to take you now through that lecture. Obviously at the time it was done with audience interaction, which we can't do here. So sadly you just have to listen to me talk about the UBC for 45 minutes to an hour, but hopefully you'll gain something from doing that. And without further ado, let us begin. So the Ultimate Backgammon Championship 2022 final was between Sander Lyloff, the 2022 world champion, and Masayuki Mochizuki, better known as Mochy, 2021 world champion. Mochy also won the world championship in 2009, and they are without doubt 2 of the top 3 or 4 players in the world at this point in time. So, what is the Ultimate Backgammon Championship? It's basically open to BMAB Grandmasters, and I'll explain BMAB in a moment. There is a contenders tournament, which takes place earlier in the year, and obviously this year was won by Sander. The winning contender is then entitled to challenge the current holder, and the holder since 2019. Not surprisingly, that's been Mochy. So what's BMAB? BMAB stands for Backgammon Masters Awarding Body, and it has been an attempt to put some structure on a rating system for backgammon players, because historically it was all done on word of mouth, but now we have measurement. So using extreme gammon, players take part in BMAB tournaments, all of their games are recorded, and then analysed using XG, and then you're graded according to your performance. And on the screen here, you can see the various levels that you can reach. I'm assuming that everybody knows what performance rating is. If you don't do that, then you go and find that from a different source, please. So, by the way, if you have a PR of 0, you're perfect, but obviously nobody has that. To become a super grandmaster, you have to have a PR of less than or equal to 2.5, based over at least 300 match points. So EP stands for experience points. There is only one super grandmaster at this point in time in the world, and strangely enough, that happens to be Mochy. But not far away from that is the Grandmaster 0 level, which is less than or equal to 2.75, and so on and so on. So Sander is a Grandmaster, Mochy is the only Super Grandmaster at this point in time. If you're interested in being rated, then I suggest you do some research on BMAP, and you can find that on the web, of course. So what's the UBC format, the Ultimate Backgammon Championship? There are 12 7-point matches, which are played over 3 days. For each match, there is 1 point for a win and 1 point for the best performance rating, giving a total of 24 points available overall. If after 12 matches the score is tied at 12-all, then there is a tiebreaker, or sorry, the tiebreaker is the overall average PR for the 12 matches. 4 matches per day, as I said. They take about an hour each, and if you look at the recordings, most of the recordings take about an hour. It's organised by Backgammon Galaxy, so Brockman Olsen has his team of helpers. So Backgammon Galaxy is obviously a play site, and it also does many other things. It has boards and books and so on. You can get lessons. And Backgammon Galaxy, along with Backgammon Heroes, are probably the two main play sites for serious backgammon players who want to play online at this point in time. Mark has also taken over the running of the Monte Carlo World Backgammon Championships, which has been excellent. And this coming year, 2023, will be his second year of running that particular tournament. So before we look at some specific positions, I just want to make some points about, or general points about the tournament. So all of the matches are on YouTube. There's a link at the end to the first match, from which point you can find the other 11 matches as well. This is what you see on screen when you're watching. So in the center is the actual play board. That's a Monte Carlo board from Backgammon Galaxy. Excellent clarity, nice checkers, etc. You'll also notice on the right, the clock is a Tempest clock, which I recently purchased, which is excellent. You can turn any smartphone into a clock. So I use an iPhone, and then it's just got a really nice rocker. So most backgammon clocks are awkward to set. The Tempest clock is not. That's very good. So in addition to that, you've got a web player cam to look at the players. You've got an XG feed. So as the plays are made, we have a real-time analysis provided by Extreme Gammon, which is incredibly useful. Now, to produce that, you need a good transcriber, someone who can come up with the pace, is familiar with the tool, can correct errors and so on and so forth. And it's no mean task to transcribe some of these matches, because towards the end, some of the moves are played extremely quickly. You also have a mini version of the board to highlight potential moves and so on. So the whole thing is very well organized. You'll see that Mochy is 43 years old from Japan and Super Grandmaster. You'll also see that Sander is from Denmark, age 40, and a Grandmaster. So you get a lot of information. The videos are extremely well done, and highly recommended. So we've talked about the presentation style. It's important also to talk about the commentary team, because without good commentary, the matches would be very dull indeed. And being a commentator at backgammon is quite an art. I think one thing this UBC proves, and along with some other tournaments that have been broadcast this year, is you need to, if you're going to do it properly, you need two players or two people commentating throughout, because the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Two commentators can interact. It also means you tend not to miss anything as well. So two players is excellent. I've watched and played backgammon for many, many years. The only two people I've ever seen who can carry a very strong commentary on their own are Paul McGreal and Falafel, both of whom are sadly no longer with us. And it's interesting that even Paul, who was very good on his own, when he teamed up with John Clark on Andy Bell's high stakes analysis of the 2005 World Championship, Paul became a better commentator because of the computer feed plus the additional commentator. So my request is that all major tournaments, if you're going to have a commentary team, you have two. Mark has tried different things over the course of the UBCs. My preference would be to have Mark anchoring for all 3 days, and then one different guest commentator each day, because the guest commentators bring different perspectives to the analysis and the conduct of the matches. It isn't always possible, obviously, to do that, because you have to have people available to do it, and in main, commentators aren't paid, so it's a question of who is available at the time. But the two commentator thing works incredibly well. This year we had Mark and Nick Blazier for the first 2 days, and then Mark and Justin Noel for the third day. And it's just interesting when listening to contrast the different styles of the commentators. And some people will like one, and some people will like another. So all down to your personal preference. The second point that I would make is time management. Both Mochy and Sander were very good at using the time available to them. Obviously, years ago, backgammon was played without clocks, but now we do have clocks, and managing the time available to you is fundamental to being a successful player. And very few players, excuse me, very few players can play good backgammon very quickly. There are some, but there are not many. Earlier in the year, I commentated on the US women versus the UK women match. And that was sadly an example of time not being utilised properly, and a lot of moves were made far too quickly. Backgammon is apparently simple, but actually very complex game. And to make the right decisions within the time limit is very difficult. So, as you will see in my summary at the end, don't waste the time that is allotted to you. Make sure you've thought through all the elements of the position before you make a decision. The next point is structure types. I think Mark and Mochy are about to publish a book of their view of the game, and I apologise, I haven't got the title of it with me here, but you can find it on the Galaxy website. In that, there's a lot of discussion of structure types. So is the structure that you have in front of you a blitzing structure, a priming structure? Could it be both? Is it a back game structure? So understanding structure types, again, is very important in terms of deciding. It informs your game plan, and without a game plan, you can't succeed. I think we're all familiar with SPRAT. The way of evaluating doubling situations. SPRAT stands for position, race, threat. Position being static elements, race being the pip count, and T being the volatility and the threats that one or other of the players may have at any point in time. I've changed my SPRAT to SPRAT, where the S stands for score, because the score makes a significant difference to your decision making with regard to both cube decisions and checker play. And you cannot play tournament backgammon without having a really good understanding of how the score impacts decision making. What you will see in the UBC is doubling far earlier in games than most people are accustomed to seeing. It's become apparent that many games warrant an early double, much earlier than perhaps was historically the case maybe 10 years ago, and you'll see the cube moving much more quickly than it used to do. In the same way, you'll see a lot more hitting between master players. Intermediates tend to have a lot of fear. Masters don't have fear because they understand the position, so you will see a lot of hitting of checkers to gain a tempo, and you will see lots of early doubling. In summary, the UBC is 12 hours of brilliant educational material. I've watched each match 3 times now, so it's 36 hours out of my life, but that time has been well spent. And if you can take the time to note down positions and make notes of things that are of interest to you, you can become a much better player by studying the UBC. And you can go back in time and watch the other UBCs. They're still on YouTube. And indeed, any high-level match with good commentary is hugely beneficial in terms of a learning curve for anyone wanting to be good at backgammon. Sorry, the presentation flipped. There are also 3 books that I think are very important that everybody has in their library. The first 2 books are those by Bill Roberti, How to Play the Opening in Backgammon. The current version of backgammon has been around for about 400 years, so you think we might know how to play by now, or play the opening by now, but Bill has brought a very good perspective on how to play the opening. And he's published 2 volumes out of a 3-volume set. The 3rd volume will be available shortly. And the subtitle part 2 is Everything Matters. And indeed it does. Every pip matters, every point matters in the score, and changing a position by moving a checker by 1 pip can make a fundamental difference to a position. So that's why you can't play good backgammon very quickly, precisely because everything does matter. So those 2 books need to be in your library. So we'll now start by looking at some positions from the match. So this is first two positions are early game positions from the opening. The score is 0-0-7. How should red play the 2-1? So a beginner would manage to find 24-23, 15-13 because it's safe. But the idea of the opening backgammon is not to play safe. I remind you that backgammon is a representation of war, and to win a war you need to have your soldiers on the field of battle, not hiding away. So 24-23, 15-13 is completely the wrong idea here. The 2 must be used to hit, 6-4. After that, the ace is less important. 24-23 is okay, as is 15-14. Both plays are very close to each other in terms of equity. And for each of these positions, I'm going to show you the XG rollout. So here it is for this position, and you'll see that XG prefers 24-23, 6-4 over 15-14, 6-4, but it's so close. You wouldn't worry if you made the wrong move. What would be worrisome if you play 24-23, 15-13, which is in XG terms a double blunder. So let's just explain that. In XG terms, if it's in black, it's good. If it's in green, it's an error, which means an equity difference of 0.03. And if it's in red, it's a blunder, which is an equity difference of 0.08. Everybody makes errors, and you have to learn to live with that. The key to winning backgammon is to avoid blunders. And here you can see that 24-23, 15-13 is minus 0.156 in terms of equity, which is what we call a double blunder, or 2 times 0.08. So 24-23, 6-4, 15-14, 6-4, perfectly acceptable. Sander played 15-14, 6-4, I think, but he found the right play. He didn't do quite so well on the second position. So here we have red with a 3-2 to play. And again, the beginner move, which actually Sander managed to choose, is 24-21, 15-13. White has rolled an early double 6 and has a pip advantage, so there'll still be 17 pips up after red has played his move. What is red's game plan in this position? Well, he can't race because he's 17 pips behind, which is the main reason that the move chosen was incorrect. Secondly, by moving up the rear checker, it becomes an object of attack. Thirdly, a checker on its own at the back can never be you can never create an anchor with a single checker. It should be blindingly obvious to everybody. And red, again, you need to get the army into play. So red does not mind being hit in this position because that gives him a chance to anchor and create a playable game. The other thing that 24, 21, 15-13 does is to create what my colleague Julian Fetterlein calls a zonk, zone of no contact. So if white rolls an uncomfortable roll, he can just dump checkers behind red's now checker on the 21 point, making all of his plays easy. So the move played creates no viable game plan. Correct is 13-10, 6-4. You can play 24, 22, 13, 10. I would have a strong preference here for 13, 10, 6-4. I might even go for 8-5, 6-4, quickly trying to build a board. All of those plays are all right, but the one chosen absolutely was not, because it did not have a viable game plan associated with it. So in summary, the opening is not a time to play safely. The soldiers must enter the field of battle. Try to avoid a single checker on the 23 point. A single checker cannot anchor. I'll just reinforce that. And beware of zonk, the zone of no contact. Now let's switch to another common backgammon theme. How should red play 5-3? Sorry, I can't remember which player made the mistake here. So there are 2 basic ways of playing this 5-3. You can play 6-1, 6-3, leaving 17 shots to white, or you can play 6-1, 3 off, taking a checker off and only leaving 11 shots. Which is correct? So the well-known phrase in backgammon, pay me now, pay me later. By paying the 6-1, 6-3 pays now. So if the blot is hit, it's bad luck, but the danger, sorry, let's start that again. If you play 6-1, 6-3, then if white doesn't hit, your period of jeopardy is over, because next time that blot on the 6 point that you just created will be cleared and you'll go on to probably win a gammon. If you elect to pay later by playing 6-1, 3 off, you still leave a blot. But if the blot is missed, then there is still long-term danger, because you still have to clear the other 2 checkers on the 6 point. Now, when is it right to leave a checker exposed, or sort of when is it right to pay now and when is it right to pay later? One of the things you look at is life after death. So let's say red plays 6-1, 6-3 and is hit. Is there life after death, i.e. after being hit? The answer to that is yes, clearly, because white has only a 3-point board and a great deal of work to do to win the game. If white had a closed board, it's a different discussion altogether, because then you want to limit shots. But here white has a fantastic amount of work to do to win the game. So it is actually correct, as you can see, to pay now by playing 6-3, 6-1, and 6-1, 3 off is a blunder. So again, you could write a whole book on pay me now, pay me later, or give countless examples, but the concept is important. And I apologize, but our expert got it wrong in this particular case, and got hit on the 3-point and went on to lose the game. He actually rolled something whereby the block on the 6-point, had he left it, would have been missed and a gammon would have been run. So lesson learnt on a 1-game rollout. Okay, so pay me now, pay me later. Is there extended jeopardy? Can you avoid it? One tries to avoid positions in backgammon where there is continued jeopardy over a series of rolls. Is there life after death? Look ahead to possible problems. So those 2 checkers left on the 6-point after 6-1, 3 off created lots of potential problems down the line. Now we come to the second book that I believe needs to be in everybody's, or third book that needs to be in everybody's library, and that is Masayuki Takayama's Back Checker Strategy, which he wrote in conjunction with Roland Herrera. This is a brilliant, simple book, and to my mind, the best backgammon book that was published last year. It's easy to read, it's easy to read twice, but it breaks the game down into stages and then gives advice on back checker strategies for each of those stages. I've adopted what Mochy has written, and I've already noticed a significant improvement in my own PR, and we'll come to examples of this in due course. So now let's come to SPRAT, score, position, race, threat. So Sander, as red, had this position, trailing 0-2 to 7. How should you play his 2-1? There are lots of ways of playing the 2-1, and because it's a small roll, there's always going to be more options. So he could creep up 24-22, play 7-6. He can save the blot on the 6-point, 6-4, and then play 13-12 with 1, or 24-23, but we've already discussed that 24-23 would not be very clever, puts the checker on the wrong point. So Sander actually took 3 to 4 minutes, or about 3 minutes, I think, over this move, and this is a very difficult decision to be faced over the board, and he should be applauded for making the right move, which is 6-4, 13-12, 13-12, 6-4. So he hides the block from the direct shot. He doesn't move the back checker up in range of all of white's attackers, but it's very close. So you will notice that the second best move here is 24-22, 76, and it's only 7/1000ths of a point difference in equity. So basically, he could have chosen either of the 2 moves. Difficult to decide over the board, but he went actually with the best play. At 0-2, he would like to win a gammon, but it's not essential. Winning the game is more important than winning the gammon. So he made the right choice at that score. Now I'm going to look at 2 score variations. Firstly, What if the score was level at 0-0? Is the answer still the same? Well, at 0-0, winning the game is even less important than winning the game. So he should make a move that has least risk. Strangely enough, it's the same move that Sander chose originally, 13-12, 6-4. But now we notice that creeping up 24-22 and making the 6.7-6 is an error. Because the gammon is not that important, it's more important to employ the stratagems outlined by Mochy in his book and keep that rear checker hidden and hide the blot. So again, I could go more into the logic of Mochy's book, but that's fundamentally his recommendations would get you to the right play in this move. Now let's change the score again. Now, what if Sander was trailing 0-5 to 7? Notice also the cube is on 2, so that red can only win with his checkers, can't win with the cube, and for white the cube is dead. So now we're looking at trying to find the best move that plays not only to the position but to the score. And here Sander wants complications, the ability to hit additional checkers. He wants to have a strong home board, and now we'll see that the best two moves include 24-22, then the one should be played 7-6, although 13-12 is also all right. But the priorities change because the score has changed, and losing a gammon is irrelevant to Sander, and that is to red, and that is a significant influence on selecting the right play. So from here on in, you need to think SPRAT, not PRAT. So SPRAT, just said that, score, position, race, strat, everything matters. Every pip matters, every point matters. And once again, read the book. So now let's move on to a relatively straightforward redoubling situation. This is Mochy, I think, on roll. Here is red. White has brought 2 checkers, red's hit a shot. He's brought his checkers round and is now considering redoubling. Should he redouble? And if redoubled, should white take? So how do you evaluate a position like this over the board? Mochy did it very, very quickly because he'd seen positions like this a lot of times before and he knew to redouble. Can you calculate it? Well, to a certain extent you can. So let's look at the position. White has 2 checkers off, so even if he's closed out, he'll still win 10% of the time, roughly. Yeah. Equally well, on his next roll, 30% of the time white will enter. Depends what he enters with and what red does, but let's say, for example, that red wins half, or white ends up winning half the times he enters, which might or might not be a realistic estimate. Half of 30 is 15, plus the 10 he's already got is 25. So he's in the take point area. Is it a take or not? Without a rollout, you can't say definitively one way or the other. Note that both players have got wastage, i.e. too many checkers on the 1 point, 2 point, 3 point, etc. The wastage largely cancels out, although white's wastage is poorer than red's. So the position is volatile. SPRAT will tell you that this is a redouble. And there you go. This is the analysis. Red will win 76% of the time, but of course he'll have given the cube to white on 4. So the cube is still live, and therefore white is able to take the cube despite the fact he only wins 23% of the time. Red must double now because by his next turn he'll probably have lost his market if white stays on the bar. So classic redouble, classic take. Both players got the decision right and got it right quickly, largely based on pattern recognition and prior knowledge, but they may have done a little calculation as well. If you're going to be successful at backgammon, you need to learn your race and your trice formulae. The best way to do that is to read Walter Trice's Backgammon Boot Camp and a few other books as well. There's no colloquialism that says don't wait for the fat lady to sing. So basically that means is if red had waited a roll, he would have missed his market, and missing your market is a disaster at backgammon because you then don't win as many points as you should have done. Finally, the clear or another aid is Wolsey's law, which basically says if you're not sure opponent has a take, then it's always right to double. It's a bit more complex than that, but basically you apply pressure by using Wolsey's law. In that position, you would still surprisingly get quite a few drops by many players who would think that white didn't have the requisite percentage winning chances to take the double. So Wolsey's law, very important piece of your backgammon armory, and Backgammon Bootcamp, an excellent book to read. How about containment? That's the next position that we're going to look at. Again, white has suffered being hit. How should red play 6-5? Obviously, he's going to make the 3-point, but should he make the 3-point and slot, or should he make the 3-point and move the checker that's currently on the 20-point? Well, you can see here that it is correct, and by a relatively small margin, to make the point and slot. Why do you slot? You slot because if white fails to enter, red can win with a redouble, thus shortening the game, and taking any risk out of the backgammon game is always a good idea. If white enters, if you slot and you get hit, red has still got lots of life after death because he's got a board where he will come in 75% of the time, and white will still need a 6 to escape. So again, I think Sander made this play very, very quickly. Again, he'd been there before, done all that, knew what to do. If you're working it out from first principles, it's much more difficult. So unfortunately, you have to have a good knowledge of containment positions to know when it's right to slot and when not, and that's beyond the bounds of this discussion. But the right play is 6-3, 6-1. Slotting key points is commonplace. You have to balance risk and reward. All of backgammon is about risk and reward. There's a reason why many of the world's best players were options traders, because there's some of the few people who really understand the concept of risk and reward. Reduce your opponent's options by closing a board as soon as possible. That's sort of blindingly obvious, but here by playing 6-1, you may, if white doesn't enter, the game is over. And then containment is a hugely complex topic about which whole books could be written. So this is just touching the surface with one position. How about an early double 5? Again, take a look at this, decide how you would play the move. What are the key points in the position? Well, red will have a small lead, but reasonably negligible in the race after the move has been played. White has a stronger home board, but only 8 checkers in what is known as the attack zone, so red should not fear an imminent blitz attack. White probably has more of a priming structure than a blitzing structure, but the next couple of rolls will determine that. So red can make his 3-point. What does he do if he does that? He can run a checker away, 23-13, and play 8-3 twice. He can simply play 13-3 twice. And the alternative is just to run the rear checker, 23-8, and then play 13-8. And as we'll see from the rollout, 2 plays stand out. 23-8, 13-8 marginally wins the battle against 13-3, probably because it keeps the checkers in points where they can be most active. It removes the opportunity for white to point with 6-4 and a few indirect hits as well. It's a close call, and none of the plays are dramatically bad, but it's important in positions like this that you are able to make a sensible choice above all else. So I saw this position come up in the match, and immediately in my mind played 23-8, 13-8, but 13-3, as we can see, is virtually identical. You can play up. So things to consider: how many checkers does your opponent have in the attack zone? What type of structure has he or she got? Is it a blitzing structure? Is it a priming structure? How will that influence your decision? And of course, if you play 23 to 8, 13 to 8, we're back to the one checker, rear checker. So red's part of red's game plan would then be predicated on escaping that rear checker. So in general, you try to keep your checkers in front of your opponent's anchor. It's okay creating points behind, but again, you want your soldiers on the field of battle. So keeping your checkers in front of your opponent in the early middle game is normally correct. Now we come to the biggest error in the match. Red is on roll, which is Mochy. Should he double? If double, should white take? Take a moment to look at the position. Then you can either pause the video, but I will continue to talk. So of the 36 possible rolls by red, 35 of them hit, only double 6 misses. So obviously it's a very volatile position. Clearly it's a double because by the next roll, red could have lost his markers. The big question here is, can white take? And this is where Sander went wrong, unfortunately. He took quite a bit of time over this, but came up with the wrong decision, which was he passed. It's actually a very comfortable and easy take. So why? Why is it an easy take when there are 35 potential hits? The main reason is that white has a lot of ways to win. So he's 18 pips up in the race, which is not insignificant, so he can win the race. If the outside checker is hit, white has anchoring possibilities on the 5 points. So he can end up in a holding game, he can end up in a back game. It's not ideal, and red is certainly the favourite. But because red has only got a 3-point board and 8 checkers in the attack zone, although more are coming, it becomes a very easy take. So white has multiple ways to win. The race is always important. Red has only got a 3-point own board, and probably the fear of the gammon clouded white's judgment in this particular instance. Throughout the match, the guys were very, very good at assessing doubles, and there were not that many doubling decisions that were dramatically wrong. This is the one that stands out. But in backgammon, we tend to be a bit negative because we learn from people's errors. We forget to applaud when people have made a very, very good move. So I'm going to counterbalance this one with a very, very good move in the next position. So are you an optimist or a pessimist? Is your glass half full or half empty? That can have an influence. And for this particular instance, Sander's glass was obviously half empty. Now we come to a blitz. Sander again on roll, leading 3-2 to 7. The cube is on 2. How should red play with 6-1? He was obviously hoping for a roll with a 3 or a 4 to hit the checker, white checker on his ace point and effect the closeout. He didn't. He rolled 6-1. If you play this without thinking, or you don't do it in a quiz, you'll just play 14 to 8, 4 to 3, and pick up the dice. Sander spent a minute or two over this one and then found the absolutely best play, which is 14 to 8, 2 to 1, the banana split play, voluntarily breaking a point to hit inboard. That's the concept of the banana split. The key reason is that it denies Mochy as white the chance to roll a 1 and an anchor, and if white rolls a 1 after red doesn't hit, then white is in the game forever. Could well get a late hit, has got good timing, and could end up either winning the game or saving the gammon. So here, 14 to 8, 2 to 1 is clearly the best play. It's nearly a double blunder not to do it. You might think it's obvious, but Sander found it in the pressure of live play, so it's to be applauded for that. Mochy stayed out, Sander closed the board and won a gammon and won that particular match. So the banana split is a valuable tool, and don't forget it exists, but don't overplay it. So as we'll see, it's superb play under pressure. You don't let your opponent anchor in a blitz. The banana split is a valuable tool. Magnus Magnusson is a quiz master in a game called Mastermind on UK TV. And if interrupted by the buzzer when asking a question, he will always say, "I've started, so I'll finish." And that is the phrase you should keep in mind when playing a blitz. So irrespective of the number of blocks strewn around, you keep hitting until your opponent anchors and the blitz basically fizzles out. Failed blitzes quite often lose because the opponent has got an anchor, hit a few blocks, and you've got a really impure structure. So for that reason, that's why you keep going with a blitz, and you hope to eventually bring the blitz home, but it doesn't always happen. So if you go back here and look at how red should play 6-2, should he play 14-8, 3-1? Employ the banana split again? Well, actually, this time, if you look at a rollout, which I haven't got here, then no, you shouldn't. You should just play 14-6 because it gives you such good structure and doesn't add a level of risk, which obviously the banana split does. But it's a very 14 with the 6-1. It's definitely right to play 14-8, 2-1. Everything matters. Remember that. So the blot on white's 2-point is relevant because if white hits in red's home board, red can return hit on the 2-point. So you can shuffle the checkers here and get to positions where it's wrong to play the banana split. And I would encourage you to look at some of the variations from this position. So that was good. Right, so now we come to the denouement of the tournament. At this point, 11 matches have been played and we're in the 12th. Sander leads 12-10. The score is Mochy 4, Sander 5. Mochy needs to win this game and match and also get a slightly better PR than Sander because he's fractionally behind on the overall PR. So this is the most crucial decision of the match. And unfortunately, this is one where the commentators' communication failed and they weren't able to speak to each other. So this position was not analysed in any depth at all during the match. Mochy, who was doing a post-match analysis, picked it up later on, but it was unfortunate that the communications had a fault at this point. There's an old saying in cricket commentary that you should never, you can do what you like when you're commentating, but never miss a ball. The same is true of backgammon. Talk as much as you like, advertise as much as you like, but never miss a key play. Now, it wasn't Mark and Justin's fault that the communications chose this moment to break. So unfortunately, they miss the most important role of, or the most important decision of the match. These things happen, and it's tough. But their commentary is fantastic, and missing this one was just unfortunate. So how do you play 4-1? You've got two choices, and they're very different choices. You can play 13-12 hitting, 13-9, so you set the checker back behind a rather inelegant 4-point prime. Or you can simply make the 5-point, which keeps the white checker on the red's ace point hemmed in, but potentially lets the other white checker escape to freedom. Now, Mochy took some time over the board, and I was watching. I certainly was not sure of the right play, but the right play, according to Extreme Gun, is very, very clear. Making the 5-point is absolutely the best play, and hitting is worse than a triple blunder. So why is that? There are a variety of reasons, which we'll look at. Advancing a prime, as Mochy says in his post-match analysis, is often better than hitting. That's a generalization. Secondly, 16 rolls don't safety the blot on red's 12-point, so red will get a second go at that nearly half the time to pick that checker up if needed. It wins, advancing the prime wins 7% more games or 1% more gammons, which is pretty amazing, really. But if you think about it, if you make the 5-point, we're back to the single checker can't be an anchor bit. So White's game plan is to escape that checker. All of his other checkers will be either in or about to enter his home board. So he'll have very restricted options on his play, and still runs the risk of being blitzed. If you play 13 to 12, 13 to 9, then White has the chance to anchor on many of Red's points, because Red's only got a 1-point board. So I've learned a lot from looking at this position and analysing variations, and I hope if something like this ever comes up, then I would make the right play. That error by Mochy gave Sander the overall PR win, so unless Sander then created or made a horrendous blunder later in the match, that meant that Sander was going to win the UBC title. But this was a roll or so later. Now Mochy is on roll, he's trailing 4-5. Should he double? So he obviously has 2 checkers, White checkers behind his 4-point prime. Is his position strong enough that he should double? Now at 4-5, which is 3 away, 2 away, you're assuming no gammons, your opponent's take point is around 28%, so much bigger than normal. Does Red have enough market losing sequences, and does he win enough gammons to make this a correct double? Again, it's easy for us in the calm of a study to analyze this and make a decision. The players have to make it in real time. Mochy decided that he did have enough threats to make this a viable double, and obviously he was keen to win the match and make it 12-all and hope that his overall PR was better. But it's not actually strong enough to double. One of the reasons is that Red only wins about 8% gammons from this position, and that's not enough to justify a double with a 33-pip racing deficit. White actually wins way more gammons than Red, because Red has to take some risks. Having given the cube, he can only win with the checkers, and we've already seen that that is quite difficult to do sometimes. Having the cube as a potential threat is quite often much stronger, and Red should have held on to the cube here. So correct play was no double and take. Mochy doubled and Sander took. So SPRAT says no double. Red has too much work to do, and beware of giving a cube that lets your opponent win the match with perfect efficiency. And now to the final position of the UBC. So as you can see, White Sander has anchored after Red's misplay of the 4-1 and the subsequent double. Mochy now has a 4-2 to play. 18 to 12 is obviously out, because White can escape one checker into the outfield, and then Red will have to attack the last checker, whatever happens. So 12 to 8 is the 4. The question is, where is the 2? And one of the things I learned many years ago when playing the game is, and is reinforced very strongly by Michy's book, is if your opponent has a perfect board or nigh on perfect board, you don't leave anything. You certainly don't leave direct shots, but you don't even leave an indirect shot. So many years ago, I watched the London Open final featuring John Hurst. Now, his opponent needlessly left him a 6-5 to hit a checker. And John was great at rolling, so he rolled the 6-5. Here, the correct move is 12 to 8, 6 to 4, leaving nothing for White to aim at. Everything else is a blunder. The fundamental essence of this position is you don't leave the indirect unless you have to. So 12 to 8, 6 to 4 was played, and lo and behold, Sander rolls 6-5 to hit the blot on White's 9-point, Red's 16-point, hit the checker, escape the other checker, closed out, won the match, won the game, won the match, won the UBC. So that denouement was 3 very expensive errors by Mochy, and they were quite unusual. I mean, playing 12 matches in 3 days is quite an ask. It's very tiring. You need to be physically fit. And maybe he was just slightly off throughout the 3 days of play for whatever reason. He didn't play at his normal, very, very high level. He just played at a high level. So, last comment on that position, when your opponent has a winning home board with nothing, not even an indirect shot, and strangely enough, when you backtrack strategy. So the result of the UBC, Sander 14, Mochy 10, overall PRs, Sander 2.8, Mochy 3.06. So you watch the match and you think, well, I wouldn't have made those errors, but actually you would, and you'd have made far worse ones. So that is still a phenomenal level of play by both players. Looks like Sander deserved to win based on the PR basis. And the other thing you can do is look at the luck factor. So, was either player particularly lucky? So I looked at the luck factor for the 12 matches. Sorry, here we go again. Computer decided to flip around a bit. So those are the luck factors from Mochy's perspective for the 12 matches. On average, his luck was a positive 0.23 points of equity per match, which is very little indeed. So, as you may have realised, luck will even out over time. And if you want to understand luck, the Dirk Schumann's theory of backgammon, I'm not going to go into it any further here, but basically the luck was pretty equal. It was slightly in Mochy's favour, but Sander still won. He had the better VR. He deserved to win. That Denouement, where Mochy made 3 errors very close to each other, was very un-Mochy-like. So, in summary, consider the structure types. Think about blitzing structures, piling structures, lacing structures, etc. Secondly, take your time with a double exclamation mark. It's a phenomenally difficult game, backgammon, so make sure you use the time that is available to you. And many years ago, a golf psychologist called Bob Rotella wrote a book called Golf is Not a Game of Perfect. You can't go out on a golf course and expect to play perfect golf for 18 holes. It doesn't happen. Similarly, backgammon is not a game of perfect. You will never play with a PR of 0, so you just have to accept that fact. What you need to do is to make as few blunders as possible. Errors are perfectly acceptable. Sorry, machine's clicked again. So the idea is to get the error rate down. You'll never get it to 0, but if you play well and study, then you will reduce your error rate and improve your performance rating. The YouTube link for the first match is there. If you watch that, you can then find the links to the other 11 matches. It is 12 hours of magnificent backgammon education, and our thanks to the Backgammon Galaxy team, not only for the commentary, but for the technical nous that was required to produce such an excellent set of programs. My email is there, as is my own website, which has got more backgammon information on it. And that, as I say, is the end of the lecture. And at this point, I'm going to bid you farewell. I hope you found the presentation instructive. Watch it a couple of times, pick up the key points, and hopefully enjoy your backgammon. Bye for now.